Friends, welcome to my last video lecture on stellar physics. So in this video, in this lecture, I am going to discuss about the stellar evolution. Basically, it is the life cycle of stars. So we have been hearing about the words like giant, supergiant, formation of stars, white dwarf, supernova, neutron star, black holes. Similar kind of words we have been facing in news related with astronomy or astrophysics. So we must have a question to know more about these terms, what these terms represent, what is the science behind these terms. Okay, so a lot of questions related with astronomy and astrophysics you must have in your mind. So in this lecture I am going to answer a few of those questions. So I have taken this picture from the website here. Basically, stellar evolution is the process by which a star changes over the course of time. Means the life cycle of a star is known as stellar evolution. Depending on the mass of the star, its lifetime can range from a few million years for the most massive to trillion of years for the least massive, which is considerably longer than the age of the universe. So, how are the stars formed? Formation of stars. Stars form inside relatively dense concentrations of the interstellar gas and dust, known as the molecular clouds or nebula. So, basically, nebula is known as the nursery of the stars. So, formation of a star starts from the nebula or interstellar gas and dust. These regions are extremely cold, temperature around 10 to 20 Kelvin. Okay, so these regions are very cold, extremely cold regions. At these temperatures, gases become molecular, meaning that atoms bind together. The deep cold also causes the gas to clump to high densities. Okay. Since the regions are dense, they are opaque to visible light and are known as dark nebula. The density is so high that these regions are opaque for the light and therefore known as the dark nebula region. Since they don't shine by optical light, we must use infrared and radio telescopes to investigate them. Okay? Yes, there is no light emission from dark nebula, therefore we must have to detect the infrared or radio waves. Star formation begins when the denser parts of the cloud core collapse under their own weight or gravity. Okay? If the density is very high of these molecular clouds, so due to high density there will be strong gravity created due to their mass, and this gravity gravitates itself, means all molecules attract each other towards each other. Okay? These cores typically have masses around 10 to the power 4 solar masses in the form of gas and dust. Okay? As the cores collapse, they fragment into clumps around 0.1 parsecs in size and 10 to 50 solar masses. The core means the central region part of the clouds. As this core collapse, the cores fragment into clumps, into clusters, small clusters of size 0.1 parsecs and having the mass 10 to 50 solar mass. Once a clump has broken free from the other parts of the cloud core, it has its own unique gravity and identity. we call it a protostar. Okay, so protostar are the initial phase of the star formation. Okay, as the protostar forms, loose gas falls into its center. The infalling gas releases kinetic energy in the form of heat, and the temperature and pressure in the center of the protostar goes up. Okay? Due to high density of the gas molecules, they will collide each other, and due to their collision, the large amount of heat is released, and therefore the central region of the protostar gains the high temperature. Okay. As its temperature approaches thousands of degrees, it becomes an IR source. As the clump becomes more dense, it becomes opaque. Escaping IR radiation is trapped, and the temperature and pressure in the center begin to increase again. At some point, the pressure stops the infall of more gas into the core, and the object becomes stable as a protostar. The envelope of the star continues to grow as infalling material is accreted. As the material goes inside the protostar core, its size continuously grows. Okay, so up to here, I think the things are clear, but I can repeat. The formation of a star begins from the nebula interstellar dust, where due to cold temperature and due to shock waves generated by supernova and other astronomical events, the molecular clouds come closer and make a large clump, and this clump generates self-gravity, and it starts collapsing due to its own gravity. And when it gains sufficient mass and size, it fragments into small clumps, and these small clumps are known as the protostars. So the formation of protostar is very simple, and the interstellar gas mainly contains the hydrogen and helium. So the formation of a star begins the condensation of hydrogen atoms and molecules, and some helium and carbon dioxide also. Okay. So far so good. We have understood, we have tried to understand the formation of protostar. Then what after the formation of protostar? Once a young protostar has accreted all of the gas and dust that it can from the cloud from which it was born, it may be massive enough to burn hydrogen in its core and shine as a star. Okay, so if the core temperature of the protostar becomes very high, up to 10 to the power 6 or 7 million, 10 to the power 7 Kelvin temperature, then the nuclear fusion, the burning of hydrogen, the conversion of the fusion of hydrogen atoms into the helium starts. So nuclear fusion starts, and this is the period when actually a star is supposed to be born. When this happens, it becomes a zero-age main sequence star. So basically, as soon as the burning of the hydrogen fuel starts, means nuclear fusion reaction starts, the time is known as the zero-age time of the star. The main sequence is defined as the part of a star's lifetime is spent burning hydrogen at its core. So the time up to which this burning of hydrogen at core continues, that time is known as the main sequence of the star. The amount of time spent on the main sequence can vary from star to the main sequence lifetime is mainly a function of a star's mass. Okay, I will explain. For example, our sun will spend between 9 to 10 billion years on the main sequence. A much lower mass star might spend 100 billion to trillion years on the main sequence, while a higher mass star might only spend a few million years. So, lifetime is inversely proportional to the mass of the stars. The more massive star, lifetime will be less. Okay, then what happens when the star leaves the main sequence, and how it happens? At the end of the main sequence, is defined as the point at which all of the hydrogen in a star's core has been converted into helium. Due to nuclear fusion, when all the hydrogen inside the core of the star converted into helium, that time is known as the end of the main sequence. Okay, and the nuclear reactions in the core of the star temporarily cease. Since these nuclear reactions provide the heat and pressure that hold up the outer layers of the star against the force of gravity, the star must readjust itself to compensate. Okay, when nuclear reaction stops at the core, what happens? Due to this nuclear fusion reaction, an enormous energy is released, and the pressure or force created by that energy actually compensates the gravitational attraction of the stars. So it stops the outer region of the star to be collapsed. But when this nuclear reaction stops, then there is no energy pressure or energy force to compensate the gravitational attraction. So what happens then? The most notable change is that the star will become a red giant, expanding in diameter, increasing in luminosity, and cooling in temperature. So when the hydrogen fuel burning stops, the star will become a red giant. Its expansion starts because there is no central core energy release to compensate the gravitational attraction. So its expansion of the star starts and its temperature gets decreased. These stars are known as the red giants. Red giant. Giant is huge in size. These changes take millions of years, so they are not obvious to our eyes. All stars will eventually run out of fuel given enough time. If sufficient time is given, all stars will run out of the fuel. Then the old age of this star starts. The great majority of stars in the universe will pass through a phase of their lives where they swell up to enormous size and become the most luminous star in their neighborhood. Okay, this expanding phase of the star continues. They will become they will get the enormous size and become the most luminous stars. These stars, the asymptotic giant branch or AGB stars, can be considered the last stage of stellar evolution when a star is truly a star, an object that shines due to energy created by thermonuclear reaction deep inside. Okay, so at the core part, still there is thermonuclear reactions going on. But not the conversion of hydrogen into helium, but helium could be converted into carbon and further carbon to become more massive elements. Okay, so thermonuclear reactions not exactly totally stops, but there is conversion of helium to carbon going on. Okay. But because the star has such a large surface area, the amount of energy escaping from any one part of the surface of the surface is much lower than for a main sequence star, and so is much cooler. Due to the large surface area, the energy radiated per unit area will be less. That's why AGB stars are red. Most have temperatures no more than 3000 to 3500 Kelvin. After the AGB, a star's lifetime is nearly over. So, after AGB, actually the death period of a star starts. There are two very important parameters for a star that determines its eventual fate. How massive is the star at the end of its life? The first one is the mass of the star at the end of its life. And is it a single star or binary or star cluster? Okay. So if it has a companion, it will have a different final stage. But basically for a single mono star system, its mass decides what will happen at the end of the stars. It's very important paragraph. If a star reaches the end of the AGB, asymptotic giant branch, with less than about 1.4 times the solar mass, it will end its life as a white dwarf. Okay? If the star at the time of AGB has the mass less than 1.4 times the mass of the sun, it will end its life as a white dwarf. But if its mass is more than 1.4 times the solar mass, it will collapse into a neutron star, ending its life as a supernova explosion. Okay, so we have heard here two new terms, white dwarf and neutron star. If at the end of AGB period, if the mass of the star is less than 1.4 times the solar mass, the final stage of the star's life will be white dwarf. But if its mass is above the 1.4 times the solar mass, it will end as a neutron star after the supernova explosion. Okay. So this mass limit, very important, this mass limit known as the Chandrasekhar limit is the limit above which white dwarfs will collapse under their own weight. Okay, if the white dwarf have the mass more than 1.4 times the solar mass, they will collapse under their own weight. The inward force of gravity becomes stronger than the outward force of electron degeneracy pressure, and the white dwarf implodes. Actually, at the time of AGB, asymptotic giant branch, the helium, whole helium converted into carbon, and ultimately due to very high density, very compact size of these white dwarfs and very high density of atoms and molecules inside, electrons feel free to move, and due to these free electrons there is electron degeneracy pressure, the electronic repulsion pressure due to Pauli exclusion principle, and it balances the further gravitational attraction. This degeneracy pressure actually exactly balances the force gravitational attraction, and that stage become a stable white dwarf state. But Subramanian Chandrasekhar proved that if the mass of the white dwarf is more than 1.4 times the solar mass, the gravitational attraction will become so strong that electron degeneracy pressure cannot exactly balance that. Okay? And at this stage, the white dwarf implodes. Most stars will end their lives as white dwarfs because most stars are relatively low mass stars. Okay, so maximum star will end their life as a white dwarf because the majority of stars in our universe are of low mass, average mass stars. Okay, but what if the star at the time of AGB. What if a star is having the mass above the Chandrasekhar limit at the time of AGB? Then the core of the star is converted entirely to iron. Okay, so hydrogen to helium, helium to carbon, and carbon further gets nuclear fusion to make higher mass elements up to the iron. Actually, iron is the most stable element of the periodic table. Okay, so there is no further conversion, there is no further nuclear fusion, and then reaches the limit where it can start to burn. It will start to draw energy from its surroundings. And this situation is actually a catastrophe, because it is this very same energy that holds up the outer layers of the star against collapse, and so the star implodes violently. The result of this implosion is a supernova, one of the most energetic events in the universe. For a few months, the amount of energy released by a supernova can equal the combined light of every other star in a galaxy. It releases so huge amount of energy that can equate the combined light of every other star in a galaxy. The light of 100 billion stars or more in one supernova explosion. Then what's left over from this titanic explosion is again dependent upon the mass of the star. Okay, after supernova explosion, what happens to the star again depends on the mass of the star. Okay, if the collapsed core is less than about 3 solar masses, more than 1.4 solar mass, but less than 3 solar masses, the result will be an ultra dense object called a neutron star. Ultra dense object. Okay, an object 10 kilometers across with 3 times as the mass of the sun. Within 10 kilometers radius of the neutron star, the mass is 3 times the solar mass, where all of its matter has been crushed tightly. So you cannot even imagine the density of neutron stars. Such objects are the most extreme form of visible matter in the universe, and bear little resemblance to anything else in human experience. Okay, but it was later discovered that almost majority of the neutron stars were found to be spinning on its axis many times, 1,000 times per second. So spinning with a very high angular velocity, and these spinning neutron stars were known as pulsars. And some pulsars have been found that spin as quickly as 1,000 times a second. I have already told. An even more extreme variable neutron star is a magnetar, a neutron star with a powerful magnetic field. Magnetar is a neutron star with a powerful magnetic field that undergoes enormous outbursts at high energy. Okay, so neutron stars having very high magnetic field are known as magnetar. Then the formation of black holes. If a star is above the 3 solar mass limit, not even the atomic forces that keep nuclei apart can keep the star from collapsing under the force of its own gravity, and the collapse will continue up to the creation of a black hole. The strangest, the most mysterious objects in the universe are the black holes. These objects have such strong gravitational fields that their escape velocities are larger than the speed of light. It means anything that comes within a few kilometers, a point called the event horizon is trapped forever, since there is no way it can travel faster than light to escape. Not even light can escape from inside the black hole. The event horizon is called as the boundary of the black hole. If anything enters inside the event horizon, if anything crosses the event horizon, it will never come out of it. And that's why black holes are perfectly black. Our understanding of the laws of physics breaks down at such extreme limits. So the laws of physics don't work in the cases of the black holes. Theorists like Stephen Hawking, John Wheeler, a lot of good theoretical physicists predict that, actually it was the prediction of Stephen Hawking, that black holes might emit a kind of radiation, but nothing like that has ever been observed. Okay, Stephen Hawking predicted that all black holes emit radiation, and that radiation was known as the Hawking radiation. But the Hawking radiation has not ever been observed till now. So, but black holes themselves have been observed indirectly. Since there is nothing coming out of the black holes, so black holes cannot be observed directly. But some indirect evidences are there, like when black holes pulls, due to its strong gravity, pulls the nearby matter. The matter comes towards the black hole in a spiral way, and from astronomical observation, it has been found that there are black hole existing in the universe. So it is an artist view of black hole. So one can easily understand, if this central part is black hole and the matter is going towards the black hole in this spiral way, if such kind of observation you get, you can confirm that the central part is a black hole. Okay? Then there is a very important parameter related with the black hole, known as the Schwarzschild radius. Okay, so to understand the Schwarzschild radius, let us recap the escape velocity formula. Escape velocity square is equal to twice gm upon r, where m is the mass of that celestial object and r is the radius of that celestial object. But if the radius, actually we can understand from here, if the mass of that celestial object remains constant but radius gets starts shrinking. So if radius gets smaller, the escape velocity will increase, and at a particular radius, when this escape velocity exactly equals the speed of light, that radius of that particular celestial object is known as the Schwarzschild radius of that object. Okay, so just replace V with C, you will find the R replaced by RS, this Schwarzschild radius, and this is the formula of Schwarzschild radius. RS is equal to twice gm upon c square. Okay, now I can actually, this is the formula of Schwarzschild radius, and using this formula one can easily calculate the Schwarzschild radius for Sun, for our Earth. Okay, what should be the radius? Just put the value of mass of that particular object here. G is the Newton's gravitational constant. So it's very easy to calculate this Schwarzschild radius for Sun, Moon, or of any celestial object. You can calculate from this formula. Okay, so Schwarzschild radius is the radius of celestial object for which it will convert into a black hole. Okay, so probably the lecture has gone long, so you must be feeling tired, but actually we have done almost, we have at the end of the lecture. So let us have patience for a few slides more. Okay. So in brief, this picture can very well explain the life cycle of stars. Okay. This is the nursery of star formation starts here, and when the protostar starts nuclear fuel burning, it enters into the main sequence. Main sequence is here. If the protostar has large mass, it will tend towards the massive star region, and if it has average mass or low mass, it will take this path of the average star. Okay, so average star, when its hydrogen nuclear fusion of hydrogen into helium stops, it starts expanding and becomes the red giant, and for further expansion, actually it will start losing its outer layer into the space and becomes the planetary nebula, and at the time when only central region is remnant and all the outer layer throws away into the space, it becomes the white dwarf, and white dwarf is stable due to electron degeneracy pressure. The second path, the massive star path, at the end of the nuclear fusion of hydrogen into helium, it has more mass than the average star, so it is converted into red supergiant, and I have told that red supergiants are AGB, asymptotic giant branches, explodes into supernova, and after supernova explosion, if the mass of this core part is less than is greater than 1.4 solar mass but less than 3 solar mass, it will become a neutron star, and if its mass is greater than 3 solar mass, it will become a black hole. Okay, so this picture summarizes all our theory part. Then there are a few more terms you have been hearing about the astrophysical objects. There are quasars. Quasars are shining so brightly that they eclipse the ancient galaxies that contain them. Quasars are distant objects powered by black holes a billion times as massive as our sun. So quasars are powered by supermassive black holes, and they are shining very brightly. They are also known as quasi-stellar objects, QSO. Quasars means quasi-stellar star-like objects. Okay. The term quasar originated as a contraction of quasi-stellar radio source, because quasars were first identified during the 1950s as sources of radio wave emission of unknown physical origin. Okay. Then we must also know the chemical composition of these stars. During the main sequence, these stars have almost 89% of the hydrogen by number of atoms and approximately 10% of the helium, and very small percentage of other heavy elements. Okay. In preparing this lecture, I have taken the contents from these three websites particularly, and also a few other sources. Okay. So thank you very much for this long lecture and for having your patience. Thank you again.